In this lesson, we are going to be adding, we're actually going to be subtracting sign numbers. All that means is we're going to be subtracting positives and negatives. Now, the good news is we don't have to subtract. We can actually turn subtraction into addition. So we can turn something that has a whole bunch of subtraction symbols and it would look something like this one. Okay, and personally, I would much rather add than subtract anything. Okay, so just a quick refresher that if you are on this particular one, we kind of clumped our negatives together. So -2 and a -5 made -7. And then we looked at the fact that we had more negatives than positives. So more negatives by 2. Okay, so that concept is totally going to be the same thing. But we have to adjust our subtraction problem. So subtracting is the same thing as adding the opposite. Okay, so if I do a quick little adjustment, I don't have to subtract a single problem. Okay, so here's what we got. All right, so we're going to be subtracting 2 minus 6. All right, now there are times that I don't need to do this, but most of the time when I'm subtracting stuff, I'm just going to add the opposite. So for me, I'm going to rewrite this thing, 2 minus 6, and I'm going to change my subtraction into addition. So I'm going to add the opposite, because the opposite of 6 is -6. Now I treat it like an adding problem. So I look at this and I say, well, I have more negatives than I do positives by 4. -4. Done. Okay, same thing. Instead of subtracting, now this is not a subtraction. This is the subtraction. So instead of subtracting, I add the opposite. So I have a -9 plus -5 is what I got going on. And then I add, because they're both negatives, I just add them together and it's still negative. I just go further into the negatives. All right, same thing here. I add the opposite. Okay, now let me write that down. So 12 minus a -4, I add the opposite. And in fact, when you subtract a negative, you're not subtracting anything at all, actually. It's 12 plus 4 is 16. Okay, same thing here. I have a -7 minus a -9. I'll add the opposite. Now I have more positives than negatives by 2. All right, 8 minus 0. It's just 8. Subtracting 0 doesn't do anything. 0 minus 15. You may or may not need to deal with this one, but just in case, add the opposite. And now it's just a -15. Because it's 0. 0 is not going to do anything. All right, so 32 minus a -32. -32 minus a -32. I'm going to add the opposite. And so now it turned into a -32 plus 32, which is going to cancel each other away and give me a 0. Now this one will not, because it's a -15 minus 15. So it's going to be a plus a -15. I'm going to add the opposite. So that makes -30. Okay, so let's say you got a bunch of them. Not a problem. I'm just going to adjust and then I'll put things together. So let me rewrite it first. So we have a 3 minus a -5 minus 6. So on every single one of these, any subtraction that I have, I'm going to add the opposite. So I'm going to add the opposite, add the opposite. So I personally like to group things together. So I'm going to group my positives together. That makes 8 plus a -6. And I have more positives by 2 than I do negatives. And there's my answer. All right, same thing here. Let me rewrite some stuff here. So I got a -8 plus a 10 minus a -7. any subtraction I have, I'm going to add the opposite. So I have a 10 and a 7 that can go together. So that's 17. And then I have more positives than negatives by 9. Okay. All right, the last problem, a little bit of word problem. You got a landscaping business makes a profit, right? So profit is a positive of 345 in 1 week. It has a loss, that's a negative, of $34 the next week, and then makes a profit of 235 the third week. What is the total or net profit? All right, so we lost money. So I'm going to just write it out to try to be straightforward of we have a positive 345 1 week, and then we're going to be adding all this stuff together, but I have a loss. So I have a negative $34 the second week, but back to a profit or a gain the last week. So if I organize this, I can put my positives together first. And so 345 and 235 is, I don't know, 345 plus 235 gets me a 580. So I should be getting a $580 total profit, but the second week we lost money. So 580. So on your calculator, you can actually do negatives. So you have 580 plus, down here is a negative button. Don't get it mistaken for a subtraction. Don't use that button when you want to do a negative. So we want to do plus a negative 34. So if you go back, so notice that that doesn't quite look like a subtraction symbol. Subtraction symbol is just as long as that kind of horizontal and it's right in the middle, where a negative is a little bit smaller and it's kind of up a little bit. So that's what your negative looks like on a calculator. Add it together, we get 546. So what was our profit? $546 for the 3 weeks. Okay, and that was subtracting, which actually none of it was subtracting. I was adjusted every single one of those into addition by changing subtraction into adding the opposite. And that's it.